Welcome to Advent of Tessellations 2023. I'm Madonna Yoder, and I hope you will join hundreds of origami folders around the world in folding this daily challenge to increase your origami tessellation folding skills, so the twists and repeating patterns folded all from a single sheet of paper. All right, welcome back to day 9 of Advent of Tess 2023, and I've got this little mini tessellation that I'm going to go ahead and say it now is much more reasonable to fold on a 16-fold grid than on larger grids because of the density of spacing that happens here on these edge bits. So we're going to have a closed hexagon and then open triangles on the opposite side, finishing up with half of a closed hexagon on the same side as the triangles. And I'm choosing to tuck those flaps under so they're stable and not flying around somewhere. So we're going to start with that closed hexagon. So just like we've done the on days 8 and 6, we're going to start with our pleats going directly into the center, or I should say our mountains going directly into the center, and we're building up that closed hexagon twist. And once it's up, we can either do the cone and maneuver it into place, or hold things flat and bop it, grab it, twist it, and it might look really ugly. It might look like it's completely messed up, but what we need to do is smooth things out a little, make sure that the corners of our hexagon are on grid lines, that all of our folds are on grid lines, and it smooths right out. So we can also double check on the back side, preferably before using the bone folder, to make sure that everything is nice and clean. And one common mistake with the closed hexagon is a lot of people will leave it back rotated like this, but we want to have those mountains coming in be straight all the way until they touch the corner of the hexagon. So from here, we're actually going to flip over to the opposite side and put in open triangle twists at tube pleat spacing. So the tube pleat spacing is really nice, especially on this size of grid, because you're going to have exactly the amount of space where you're touching but not overlapping. So it's the densest spacing without overlap. Really convenient, and I will say we're not going to keep doing that as we get into some more complex things, but most of what we'll be doing will be at tube pleat spacing. So in this case, we have the valley one space away from the folded mountain, our mountain one space further, and since this is an open triangle, we're going to have our target triangle there on top of the mountain. So now when we set up our second pleat, we're going to open our original pleat to find specifically the mountain that's touching the third side, or I should say the grid line that's touching the third side of this target triangle, and make it a mountain, and then have the valley one spacing further from the target triangle. And I can press just outside, like one spacing outside of the target triangle along those mountains on each corner to squash. So from here, just like days 6 and 7, we're going to have the next twist out on the same side as the triangles. So I'm going to choose to go counterclockwise so that we get those friendly overlaps and it's an easier one to put in. Of course, doing that, we mostly lose our reference for the tube, but we can say the corner of this open twist is one spacing out from the closed hole. Therefore, the corner is going to need to be one spacing out on this one as well. And we're going to have that valley in the direction where we can go a nice long way, not directly into the corner of the existing twist. This is also the direction where there is a 120-degree angle between these two mountain folds. So whenever we're looking at putting in our next twist, we want to be aware of what angles we need when we are placing these twists. And then again, we have this target triangle, so we need to open the next pleat and erase the extension of it to find our third pleat. And we can squash this triangle into place. From here, now I have this pleat overlap that I want to resolve. And just like we did on day 6, I'm going to bring this last grid spacing as a flap in and let the paper on the inside pop out in order to make this half of a closed hexagon. But the difference is when I'm bringing this flap in, there's other layers underneath that. So what I'm going to do is tuck that flap underneath so it makes a nice clean border and is out of the way and doesn't visually obstruct the open triangle. So I'm going to go around and do that on all of the sides. I'll do another one nice and slow. So I've got my valley hitting one space from the central hexagon hole. My mountain one spacing further. I'm remembering that I'm doing an open triangle, making that open triangle hole and squash. Now I'm bringing that flap at the edge in. And especially if I folded this pleat overlap hard, I'm going to need to make sure that this little tab pops out. And then I'll tuck the edge flap under the pleat from the open triangle. Now again at full speed, I'm setting up the open triangle, squashing it down, bringing in that flap for the hexagon, making sure that that little tab on the inside is brought out, and tucking that edge flap. And again, now could you open the flap, make sure that little hexagon bit is out, and tuck that in before you squash the triangle? Yes, you absolutely could. But we're trying to break things down into repeating steps. So for the next one, I'm going to have my triangle coming out here, and notice that up in this overlap, the overlap with the first triangle that I made, that's overlapping differently. So I can, at this stage, when it's easiest, bring up that overlap, and I can even go ahead and set up that hexagon. So notice, instead of running my new pleat through first and then closing the old pleat over it, I just said, you know what, I'm gonna need that to be open anyways. I can just go ahead and make that new hexagon and tuck the flap on the edge. That is totally doable. And then we can squash the triangle. Notice that I'm leaving this area a little bit 3D so that I don't have to go digging for that corner when I want to open it again. And tuck the flap. So there we have it. The next mini tessellation in Advent of Tess. And so this one, just like the others in Advent of Tess, and I believe this one is called Wagon Wheel, but check the description on that, has multiple ways to repeat it. And this is the last that we'll be doing that are just hexagons and triangles. We're going to introduce another new twist tomorrow. So happy folding, and I will see you there.